Visuals give comics a massive advantage over books because what's happening is clearly defined and more entertaining since we don't have to use imagination. This is why people began mixing visuals with words to make them, and later with the internet came webcomics, though usually they aren't too impressive since most are made by one person. Control-Delete focuses mostly on dialogue-based jokes as opposed to the art, for example. But unlike CAD, Lackadaisy went in the opposite direction by being stunningly beautiful visually while forgetting why books work. They had captivating stories that made up for the lack of being able to see what's happening. Lackadaisy doesn't, and while it leans in heavily when it comes to the art, all those visuals stop mattering because story-wise it can't pull its own weight. Overview plus credits. Lackadaisy is a highly successful webcomic made by Tracy Butler. It started in 2006 and ended in 2020, so she could begin production on creating an animated pilot for it that finally finished in 2023. It did very well, with it getting 17 million views and a lot of buzz from every cartoon adjacent YouTuber, though it died down quickly despite them making a few mini episodes. Recently, it was greenlit by Glitch and the first episode is in production. Lackadaisy's success is as high as ever, and it's because the pilot and comic are beautiful, especially the comic, and it's impressive since even though it's made by one person, its artistic quality rivals that of something official like Absolute Batman. It's also really funny. The 1920s Prohibition era setting is unique, and it stays as historically accurate as possible, helping with immersion. The pilot's animation is Helluva Boss-esque, i.e. really good, and the backgrounds are just as good as they are in the comic, though that's all I've got. It looks good and it's funny. I'll talk about the comic first and then the pilot, but this is when it breaks down because after about 50 pages, you realize that the lore is hollow, plus it jumps everywhere. Lackadaisy is only 175 pages long, but it takes 161 pages for our protagonists to team up and do something serious together, and Ivy doesn't actually help with that mission. That's over 90% of the story, or if you are reading it live, 11 years, and there's only 14 pages left by that point. This is because even though it seems like a lot is happening due to these big pages, action, and high word and panel counts, we don't actually learn or go through much. Commonly, it'll tell us either things we already know or some lore that could be explained in 1 or 2 pages, but it stretches them out for 5 or 10. It's why there aren't any major arcs but just mini ones that last for upwards of 30 pages, despite the entire comic taking place in an at most 3-day time span. A great example of this is a business deal conversation between Mitzi and Wick. It takes place over the course of 10 pages, but we can easily surmise what we learned in 1 sentence. Wick's into Mitzi, so she tries to use that so he agrees to a business deal, though since she's a criminal he declines and she robs him instead. It would have been easy to combine many of these pages together and cut tons of panels and would easily get the point. Or another example is the first fight that happens with the pig farmers in Lackadaisy. That mini arc takes 32 pages to complete, but we didn't need to do things like introducing Mordecai or understanding the backstory of Nico and Seraphine, because that stuff's not relevant for this arc, and for Nico and Seraphine, they only become relevant a literal 101 pages after their last appearance during this time period. The story actually does it a lot since it wants to introduce and give time to everyone, so it's common to see us getting 10 pages of Rocky and then 15 of Mordecai. While this sounds admirable, due to the immense bloating the story faces, and because there are too many characters to do this effectively with, it feels like we barely know anybody. Plus the priorities are totally off. Wick, who's a side character that's irrelevant after page 98, gets a total of 20 appearances, just like Ivy up to that point. Why does he get as much spotlight as one of the main characters when his biggest contribution to the plot is getting robbed? With all this jumping around and no time focus on anyone, we only learn a chapter's worth of info about everyone. Mordecai and Victor work together at one point, now they hate each other. Mitzi might have killed her husband, we don't know. Rocky left his family to explore the West. Calvin didn't pass his police exams, so he joined Lackadaisy because his cousin asked him to, and Ivy's dad worked with Atlas, which is why she joined. That's 5 things about each character, and they all feel like starts to possible arcs or introductions, because all we get is 10 pages worth of lore for everyone, despite it being 175 pages long. This is why the story and lore feel so hollow despite it seeming like there's a lot there. It's like a bag of chips. Half it's air and you only realize it when you open it, so it all culminates into the story feeling like mud, plus nothing going anywhere. The story is equivalent to a really strong guy trying to push a massive boulder in slippery mud. He can't get traction because of the mud, so the boulder never moves, but he looks cool, and it's impressive to watch him try for a few minutes. There's a rumor that Mitzi killed Atlas, so is it true? What'll happen when Wick realizes Mitzi robbed him? What happened after Zib went free? And did he leave Lackadaisy since he threw his pin in the drain? What'll Victor and his wife talk about? Will Marigold and Lackadaisy end up fighting each other for real? I can ask a lot more of these questions, but the boulder never moves. We never get answers to any of these things, because the story is cut short. Mitzi possibly killing Atlas is teased a tiny bit, but we never learn who did it. We don't know how Wick will feel once he finds out Mitzi robbed him, and we never see Zib again after he's let out of prison. It all feels like it's building up to nothing the entire time. Whenever one of the maybe 4 fights in the whole comic happen, it's just because that's what happened before since we know missions are dangerous, and now it's expected. Us getting Victor and Mordecai's backstory didn't feel earned because it wasn't built up at all. It was just a random lore dump from characters that don't matter. Become a member for $3 if you want to see videos early or extra videos. Historical accuracy. The author wanted the story to be historically accurate at the sacrifice of understandability. If you don't know 20s slang or history, things like Zib sighing in jail when he realizes he's talking to someone from the Treasury Department, or Gracie saying, "not really the cake eater type are ya," to Mordecai make things confusing. That is, if the author never explained any of these things under the pages. While this sort of thing is common, it's not common enough to damage your experience notably. Characters. I was going to analyze everyone like usual, but there's nothing here. Everyone's static, flat, a simple combination of traits, and it all feels like they're starting arcs without actually going through any. Rocky's eccentric and energetic, Calvin's shy and good with guns, Mordecai's a psychopath, Victor's just an old war vet, and Wick's a businessman who's into Mitzi. Miss M looks like she could get an arc by running Lackadaisy for Atlas Legacy, but as usual, nothing happens. You learn surface traits, maybe a little backstory, and that's all. Ivy just gets like 1 page worth of info too, cause she just likes Calvin. Everyone's forgettable because the story gives you nothing to hold on to, making the entire cast functionally bad. Comic conclusion. While the comic has beautiful art, solid character designs, good humor, and extreme accuracy to the time period it's set in, that's all. Near the final pages, it just tries to wow you with its art, like it's distracting you from its poorly written slogfest of a story, but that just makes things feel even slower. I don't recommend Lackadaisy's comic. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's mediocre and forgettable, so it's not worth the time. If the comic isn't that good though, what about the pilot? Unlike other pilots like Has Been Hotels or Digital Circuses that got unignorably big communities, basically nobody stayed around for Lackadaisy despite the amazing surface level aspects because it chose animation over hooking the audience. The whole point of a pilot is to give us an idea of what to expect if it became an actual series. That's why a lot of pilots in the past like Adventure Times and Steven Universes either had way worse animation than their official counterparts, or the character designs are totally different. Online pilots basically ditch this way of doing things by already having finished character designs, and they go in heavily with good animation. Sometimes it feels like The Art of Murder, but the ones that won like Digital Circus and Has Been Hotel did so because it succeeded at being interesting. Has-Been's world, super unique premise of redeeming sinners in hell, and its multitude of wacky characters gave us a lot to hold on to and think about, which is why when it was new, people focused on theories about the world building. And Digital Circus stuck because the psychological horror aspect of being trapped in a digital world and forgetting who you are is incredible. Lackadaisy totally fails at this. It's just a real world with cat people set in the 1920s during the Prohibition era. Plus, the majority of the pilot is just a fight. And while it's well animated, it won't stick with you and there's not much to talk about with it. In fact, if you didn't read the comic, this would have you think that Lackadaisy would be an action-dense show, when in reality it's very character-focused. Since it's character-focused and its premise isn't immediately interesting, you might think that they try to focus on making the characters interesting, but they don't. Characters. Since the majority of the pilot is just a fight, and it obviously is overall way shorter than the comic, it has even weaker characters. That's bad because the comic characters were already flat and static, but it also gives us nothing of substance to attach to. All we get are again the traits of Rocky, Calvin, Mitzi, Ivy, and a few others, but watered down since it's not within the context of everything we learn about the characters in the comic. With non-mains like Wick and Zib, they just feel thrown in because they exist and do stuff in the comic, but they're not relevant to the episode, and things they do make no sense. In the comic, Wick only comes to the bar to impress his business partners. He doesn't come here casually, and Zib flirts with Wick, even though in the comic they never had a conversation. Why's he got this energy? Nico and Seraphine get more screen time and characterization than in the comic, but all we learn from this is that they're against Lackadaisy and they find violence thrilling. Mordecai is the same since we get his traits but watered down again, but it's confusing since he spares Ivy. This is a completely BS writing decision and it makes no sense, so I call it the Mordecai Dilemma. With pilot only context, this makes no sense. He's shown to be cold and efficient, and he was completely ready to kill Calvin during their little scuffle. And earlier, he only didn't kill Ivy because he missed. So when he has a clear, easy shot, he should shoot. Comic context doesn't help either because it just reinforces this fact. He directly threatens Mitzi, someone who he worked with, and he handed a gun to Mitzi so she could allegedly kill Atlas, i.e. the person who gave him a way to make money and live. He's heartless through and through, and never in the comic does he show any empathy, even when he doesn't understand why he has to kill people. The last thing that we can turn to is a mini episode, Ingenue. And there we learn that Mordecai knew Ivy as a kid. We can conclude that he spared her because of nostalgia. But as I just explained, that's not a good enough reason for Mordecai to not kill, so this can mean one of two things. The author planned for Mordecai to show empathy at some point, but this was planned and we never saw it in the comic since it ends at page 175, or the author thought it'd be more interesting to make Mordecai slightly more emotional. Either way, if you read the comic, watch Ingenue and the pilot, or just the pilot, this moment makes no sense. Speaking of the comic, they rely entirely on comic fans. Like the FNAF movie, this pilot was made for fans of the comic as opposed to general indie animation fans. If you're not already a fan of FNAF, then the movie won't be nearly as enjoyable because of the references they make, and because there's a specific wow factor only fans of properties that get film adaptations can appreciate. As a fan, finally being able to hear Rocky sing about the Mississippi River or screaming poems maniacally as he's throwing bombs, and being able to see all your favorite characters moving fluidly is satisfying. It makes everything pop so much more because finally, this comic that hasn't been updated for the last half decade got animated. If I was a Lackadaisy fan, I'd have no issue with this being mostly action, because in those shoes, I'd already know all these characters, and to me, if the pilot just reintroduced or characterized these guys that I already know so well, it'd feel like a waste of time. But this is a massive flaw in how it's made, because there are a lot more people who watch cartoons than people who read webcomics, and so these aspects or references that pop out to comic fans simply don't hit for most, and all that can be appreciated is the animation. Unless you read the comic, you won't get jokes like when Rocky pats Wick on the back while talking about blowing stuff up, since it's a reference to when Wick exploded a mountain. And you wouldn't understand that Calvin finding the tiny gun in the middle of the seat is a callback to when Mitzi had the same gun while they were fighting the farmers earlier on in the story, and how the joke is formatted is also a reference to that. In a landscape where great animation is more common than sand, it's natural that this wouldn't get as far as the pilots before it. Pilot functionality failure. Compared to the comic, the pilot's flatter, shorter, and spends no time characterizing who you're supposed to care about and stick with for the whole story, so it fails at actually being a pilot. When someone says based off this pilot, we want a Lackadaisy movie, or we need more of this, what exactly are they asking for? More action and jokes, the setting which feels like a background element, or the flat characters? Based off this, Lackadaisy could be episodic or serialized. It could be action based or more so comedy. It could be trying to do something deeper or give us character arcs, or not. When people said they wanted more has-been, we know what they meant. We want to see if the hotel would work, more of the world building, how exactly redemption works, and the funny characters. And Adventure Time's clearly communicated that it'd be an episodic, wacky show where Finn and Jake go on silly adventures. And it's fine if the shows evolve past their pilot concepts. Has-Been did by introducing Heaven, and Adventure Time got really serious in its later seasons. But what Lackadaisy gives us is nothing but overly good animation and just an idea for a show that's undefined. Final conclusion. Lackadaisy is a property that always tries to fool you into thinking it's good because it's visually stunning to hide the fact that it's flat and mediocre. The channel showed off a teaser for the first episode, which is a direct adaptation of the spaghetti noodle scene from the comic. This implies that the Lackadaisy animated series is just going to be a comic adaptation, and if that's the case, I've got very little hope for it. I don't know that for sure, so I could be wrong, and maybe they'll fix the issues I've already talked about. It's not a lost cause like Pork Chop and Flat Screen because it technically hasn't even started yet, but my hopes aren't high. Subscribe, like, become a member for $3 to see extra and early videos, and I'll see you in whatever my next video will be about. After he declines to work with Mitzi, that's the last time we see him. You could have shortened that into like 3 pages. All that time into 3 pages. And yes, the comic is funny during that, but it's just using its time so poorly and badly. And the fact of the matter is that, again, the art takes freaking forever to make. So it's like, you're not only using your time poorly, but you're also spending tons and tons of time on this beautiful artwork on pages that could easily be skipped and the people reading could understand, you know, what's going on in the story. There is like there's so many mundane conversations or tiny moments or stuff. It's too much, okay? It's just too much. But the pacing is like a crawl. There's only, like, for example, one of the biggest things about Calvin is that as to why he was